Jasmine couldn't stop thinking about J.D. Vance's words. You might want to look closer at what you think you know. The phrase replayed in her mind like a broken record. It was cryptic, almost taunting, and it left her feeling uneasy. She had always prided herself on being thorough, on digging deeper than others dared to go. But Vance's response made her wonder, had she missed something? Was there more to his project than met the eye? Back in her lab, Jasmine decided to take another look at everything she knew about Stellar Horizons. She pulled up files, articles, and technical reports, poring over them with fresh eyes. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The company's public disclosures were impressive but vague, filled with buzzwords like breakthrough technology and revolutionary advancements. There were plenty of diagrams and simulations, but no concrete evidence of how their systems actually worked. Still, that wasn't unusual for a private aerospace company. Secrecy was part of the game. But then Jasmine noticed something strange. While reviewing satellite data from one of Stellar Horizons' recent test launches, she spotted an anomaly. On the surface, the launch appeared normal, a rocket ascending into orbit, just like any other mission. However, when she zoomed in, on the footage, she saw something odd. Around the rocket, there was a faint distortion in the air, almost like heat waves shimmering off asphalt on a hot day. But this wasn't heat. It was something else entirely. Curious, Jasmine enhanced the image and ran it through several analysis programs. The results were baffling. The distortion didn't match any known atmospheric phenomenon. It wasn't caused by engine exhaust or solar radiation either. Whatever it was, it seemed to bend light itself, creating ripples in space-time. Jasmine stared at her screen, her pulse quickening. Could this be some kind of experimental propulsion system? If so, it was far beyond anything currently understood by science. Over the next few days, Jasmine became obsessed with unraveling the mystery. She spent hours cross-referencing the data with theoretical models, trying to make sense of what she'd found. Her initial skepticism about Vance began to waver. Maybe he wasn't exaggerating after all. Maybe his claims about interstellar travel weren't just hype. They were based on real, groundbreaking discoveries. But if that was true, why hadn't anyone else noticed? And why was Vance keeping it hidden? Determined to find answers, Jasmine reached out to former employees of Stellar Horizons. Most ignored her emails or refused to comment, citing non-disclosure agreements. Finally, she got lucky. A woman named Sarah Mitchell agreed to meet her for coffee. Sarah was older than Jasmine, with sharp features and a wary expression. She introduced herself briefly before diving straight into the reason for their meeting. I heard you've been asking questions about Stellar Horizons, she said, stirring sugar into her cup. Let me guess, you're not buying J.D. Vance's sales pitch. Jasmine nodded. Something doesn't add up. I saw footage of one of their test launches and there's something weird going on. I can't explain it. Sarah leaned back in her chair, studying Jasmine carefully. You're persistent. I'll give you that. Not many people dig as deep as you have, but trust me, you don't want to stick your nose where it doesn't belong. Why not? Jasmine asked, leaning forward. What are they hiding? For a moment, Sarah hesitated. Then she sighed and lowered her voice. Look, I used to work on the propulsion team. We were told we were building engines for deep space missions, but that wasn't the whole story. Those tests you saw, they weren't just about rockets. They were experimenting with wormholes. Jasmine blinked, stunned. Wormholes, you mean like in science fiction? I wish it were fiction, Sarah replied grimly. But it's real, or at least, they think it is. Vance has been pouring billions into research trying to stabilize microscopic wormholes long enough to send objects or people through them. The problem is it's dangerous. Every time they try, something goes wrong. Equipment malfunctions, readings spike off the charts. Some people even disappeared. Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. Disappeared? What do you mean? I mean exactly that, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. One day they're there, and the next they're gone. No trace, no explanation. Vance says it's part of the learning process, but I'm not so sure. Something about this whole thing feels off. Despite Sarah's warnings, Jasmine couldn't let it go. The idea of wormhole technology fascinated her, even as it terrified her. If Stellar Horizons really had made progress in this area, it would change everything. Not just space exploration, but humanity's understanding of the universe itself. But at what cost? And why was Vance keeping it secret? The more Jasmine thought about it, the angrier she became. Vance had dismissed her concerns at the conference, acting as though she was naive or uninformed. But now she realized he wasn't just arrogant, he was hiding something big. Something that could affect millions of lives. Determined to confront him again, Jasmine booked a flight to San Francisco, where Stellar Horizons headquarters was located. She didn't have an appointment, but she figured she could at least try to get past security. Armed with her findings and a growing sense of urgency, she arrived at the sleek glass building early one morning. To her surprise, getting inside wasn't as difficult as she expected. After explaining her credentials to the receptionist, she was escorted to a waiting area. Within minutes, a young assistant appeared and led her to a private office. Sitting behind a massive desk was J.D. Vance himself. Vance looked up as Jasmine entered, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Crockett," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "This is unexpected." "I need answers," Jasmine said without preamble. She placed her laptop on his desk and opened the satellite footage she'd analyzed. "Explain this." Vance glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening slightly. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "You've done your homework," he admitted, "but you're only seeing part of the picture." "What's the full picture, then?" Jasmine demanded. "Are you really experimenting with wormholes? Is that how you plan to reach Proxima Centauri?" Vance hesitated, as if weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, we are. But it's not just about reaching another star system. It's about connecting with intelligent life beyond Earth." Jasmine stared at him dumbfounded. "Intelligent life? Are you saying aliens are involved?" "In a manner of speaking," Vance replied. "We've detected signals, patterns of energy, that suggest we're not alone in the universe. These wormholes may be our way of communicating with them, or even traveling to their world." Jasmine's mind raced. This was far bigger than she'd anticipated. "And you've kept this hidden from the public because humanity isn't ready," Vance said bluntly. "Imagine the chaos if people found out tomorrow that aliens exist. Governments would panic, economies would collapse, and wars might break out. We need to approach this carefully." Jasmine wanted to argue, but she couldn't deny the logic in his words. Still, it bothered her that Vance was making decisions on behalf of everyone. Who gave him the right to decide what humanity could handle? And what about the risks? Wormhole technology sounded incredible, but it also sounded unstable and potentially deadly. As if reading her thoughts, Vance added, "I understand your concerns. Believe me, I do. But sometimes the greatest leaps forward require taking risks. You of all people should understand that." Jasmine didn't respond right away. She knew he was right, at least partially. Her own work had always pushed boundaries, challenging conventional wisdom. But this was different. This wasn't just about advancing science. It was about reshaping the future of humanity itself. Before she could say anything else, Vance stood up and walked to the window. "Tell me, Ms. Crockett, what drives you? Why are you so passionate about space exploration?" Caught off guard by the question, Jasmine took a moment to answer. "Because I believe we're meant to explore," she said finally. "To push beyond our limits and discover what's out there. But that doesn't mean we should rush blindly into danger." Vance turned to face her, his expression softening. "Neither should we let fear hold us back. What I'm doing may seem reckless to you, but it's necessary. Humanity is standing on the brink of something extraordinary, and whether you agree with my methods or not, I think you want to be part of it." Jasmine didn't know how to respond. Part of her still distrusted Vance, but another part couldn't deny the allure of what he was offering. If he was telling the truth, she was looking at the chance of a lifetime, the opportunity to witness history in the making. As she left Vance's office, Jasmine realized she was facing a choice. She could walk away, continue doubting him, and possibly miss out on the most important discovery of her generation. Or she could dive headfirst into the unknown, trusting that Vance's vision was worth the risk. Either way, her life would never be the same again. Jasmine Crockett was not someone who liked to sit quietly in the background. She had always been the kind of person who spoke her mind, especially when she believed something wasn't right. Growing up in a small town in Texas, she often felt like an outsider. While other kids were playing sports or hanging out at the mall, Jasmine spent most of her time reading books about science and dreaming of faraway places beyond Earth. Her parents, though supportive, didn't fully understand her obsession with space travel. To them, it seemed like a distant dream that would never come true. But Jasmine didn't care. She knew what she wanted, and nothing was going to stop her from chasing it. By the time she turned 25, Jasmine had already made a name for herself as one of the brightest young scientists in her field. Her specialty was propulsion systems, specifically designing engines capable of traveling faster and farther than anything humans had ever built before. It wasn't easy work, but Jasmine thrived on solving problems that others thought were impossible. She spent countless hours in her lab surrounded by blueprints, computer screens, and half-empty coffee cups. Her dedication paid off when she developed a prototype engine that showed promise for interstellar travel. The design wasn't perfect yet, but it was enough to get people talking. Soon, Jasmine's name started appearing in scientific journals and tech magazines. One day, while scrolling through social media during a rare break from her experiments, Jasmine stumbled across an article about J.D. Vance. Vance was a well-known figure in the world of aerospace technology. He had founded a company called Stellar Horizons, which aimed to send humans to colonize planets outside our solar system. The article described how Vance had just announced plans for humanity's first colony ship, destined for Proxima Centauri, the closest star system to Earth. According to Vance, the mission would launch within the next decade, and he promised it would change the course of human history forever. At first, Jasmine felt excited. This was exactly the kind of bold vision she admired. But as she read further, her excitement turned into skepticism. Vance's claims sounded too good to be true. How could anyone build a colony ship capable of sustaining life over such long distances in less than 10 years? Even with all the advances in technology, there were still so many unanswered questions. What about radiation protection, food supply, psychological effects on the crew? Vance seemed to gloss over these challenges, focusing instead on grand promises and flashy presentations. Jasmine couldn't let it go. Over the next few days, she dug deeper into Vance's plans, scouring every piece of information she could find online. The more she learned, the more frustrated she became. It wasn't just that Vance was being overly optimistic. It was that he appeared to be deliberately avoiding the hard truths. His timeline seemed rushed, almost reckless. And then there was the issue of funding. Building a colony ship would cost billions, maybe even trillions of dollars. Where was all this money coming from? Who was bankrolling Vance's ambitious project? Determined to voice her concerns, Jasmine decided to attend a tech conference where Vance was scheduled to give a keynote speech. The event was held in Austin, Texas, and attracted some of the biggest names in science and technology. Jasmine arrived early, clutching a notebook filled with notes and questions. She wasn't sure if she'd have the chance to confront Vance directly, but she hoped she could at least ask him a tough question during the Q&A session. When Vance finally took the stage, the room erupted into applause. He looked confident, dressed in a sharp suit with a wireless microphone clipped to his lapel. As he began speaking, Jasmine listened intently. Vance talked about the future of space exploration, painting a picture of humanity spreading across the stars. He described the colony ship as a symbol of hope, a way to ensure the survival of the human race. His words were inspiring, but Jasmine noticed something unsettling. Every time he mentioned potential obstacles, he brushed them aside with vague reassurances. "We'll figure it out," he said repeatedly, as if the details didn't matter. After his speech, the moderator opened the floor for questions. Jasmine raised her hand immediately. her heart pounding with anticipation. When the moderator called on her, she stood up and introduced herself. "My name is Jasmine Crockett," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm a scientist, working on advanced propulsion systems. Mr. Vance, I appreciate your enthusiasm for space exploration, but I have serious doubts about the feasibility of your timeline. Do you really believe we can overcome all the technical and logistical challenges in just 10 years? The audience fell silent, waiting for Vance's response. For a moment, he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "Ms. Crockett," he said, his tone calm but firm, "I admire your passion for detail, but sometimes, focusing too much on the obstacles can blind us to the bigger picture. Yes, there are challenges ahead, but we faced challenges before and we've always found a way to succeed." Jasmine frowned. That wasn't the answer she was looking for. "But isn't it irresponsible to make promises you might not be able to keep?" she pressed. "People are counting on you to deliver. If you fail, the consequences could be catastrophic." Vance chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You're assuming I'm making promises based on guesswork," he replied. "Trust me, Ms. Crockett, we've done our homework. You might want to look closer at what you think you know." With that, he thanked her for her question and moved on to the next person in line. Jasmine sat down, feeling both annoyed and intrigued. Vance's comment lingered in her mind long after the conference ended. What did he mean by look closer? Was he hinting at something she hadn't considered? Or was he just trying to deflect criticism with cryptic remarks? As she walked back to her car, Jasmine realized this wasn't the end of the conversation. It was only the beginning. Whatever secrets Vance was hiding, she was determined to uncover them. Little did she know, her quest for answers would lead her down a path far stranger and more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Jasmine's mind was a whirlwind as she left Stellar Horizons headquarters. She had gone there hoping to expose J.D. Vance's secrets, but instead she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. The idea of wormholes and alien contact wasn't just science fiction, it was real. And Vance wasn't just building spaceships, he was preparing humanity for something far bigger. But how much of what he said could she trust? Was he truly acting in the best interests of humanity, or was he driven by ego and ambition? The next morning, Jasmine received an email from Vance's assistant. It was brief and formal, inviting her to visit a secret facility in the Nevada desert. The message included coordinates and a time to arrive, but offered no explanation. Jasmine hesitated. Going to a remote location with someone she barely trusted felt risky, but curiosity outweighed caution. If Vance was willing to show her his work firsthand, she couldn't pass up the chance to see it for herself. 2 days later, Jasmine boarded a private jet arranged by Stellar Horizons. The flight was quiet, giving her plenty of time to think. She reviewed the satellite footage again, trying to make sense of the distortion she'd seen. No matter how many times she analyzed it, the evidence pointed to something extraordinary. Still, she reminded herself not to get carried away. Just because Vance claimed to be working on revolutionary technology didn't mean it was safe or ethical. When the plane landed, a car was waiting to take her to the facility. The drive took nearly 2 hours, winding through barren desert landscapes under a blazing sun. As they approached their destination, Jasmine noticed the terrain changing. High fences topped with barbed wire surrounded the area, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. This wasn't just a research lab, it was a fortress. At the gate, her driver handed over identification papers, and after a thorough check, they were allowed inside. The facility itself was massive, with sleek modern buildings blending into the rocky hills. A man in a white lab coat greeted Jasmine as she stepped out of the car. "Welcome, Dr. Crockett," he said warmly. "I'm Daniel Carter, lead physicist here. Mr. Vance asked me to give you a tour." Daniel seemed friendly enough, but Jasmine remained cautious. She followed him into one of the buildings where rows of computers and monitors lined the walls. Scientists bustled around, typing furiously or discussing equations on whiteboards. Despite the high-tech surroundings, there was an air of tension, as if everyone was holding their breath. This is our main control center, Daniel explained, gesturing to the room. From here we monitor all experiments and analyze data in real time. What kind of experiments? Jasmine asked, though she already suspected the answer. Daniel smiled faintly. You'll see soon enough. He led her down a long corridor to a large observation deck overlooking a cavernous chamber below. In the center of the room stood a massive machine, its surface covered in glowing panels and intricate wiring. Surrounding it were scaffolds and cranes, with workers making final adjustments. Jasmine stared at the device, her heart pounding. It looked nothing like any spacecraft she'd ever seen. That, Daniel said proudly, is the Gateway prototype. It's designed to generate and stabilize a wormhole large enough to transport objects, or people, across vast distances. Jasmine's eyes widened. And you've tested it? We've made progress, Daniel replied cautiously. But it's still experimental. Each attempt brings us closer to success, but there are complications. Like what? Jasmine pressed. Daniel hesitated before answering. Energy fluctuations, structural instability, unpredictable outcomes. Some tests have resulted in equipment failure, or worse. Jasmine remembered Sarah Mitchell's warning about people disappearing. She glanced at Daniel, wondering if he was hiding something. Does Vance know about these risks? He does, Daniel admitted, but he believes the potential rewards outweigh the dangers. We're standing on the edge of a new era, Dr. Crockett. For the first time, we're not just exploring space. We're connecting with other civilizations. The mention of aliens sent a shiver down Jasmine's spine. Have you actually contacted them? The intelligent life Vance mentioned? Daniel nodded slowly. Not directly, no, but we've detected signals, patterns of energy that suggest they're aware of us. They call themselves the Zainari. From what we can gather, they've been observing Earth for centuries, guiding our development in subtle ways. Jasmine struggled to process this information. Aliens watching humanity evolve? It sounded like something out of a movie. Yet the evidence was right in front of her. The Gateway prototype, the data pouring into the control center, the sheer scale of the operation. Vance hadn't been exaggerating after all. He was playing a game far more complex than she'd imagined. Later that evening, Vance joined Jasmine for dinner in a private dining room. The meal was simple but elegant, served by staff who moved quietly in and out of the room. Vance seemed relaxed, leaning back in his chair as he sipped a glass of wine. So, he said, setting the glass down, what do you think of our little project? It's incredible, Jasmine admitted, but also terrifying. Do you really believe humanity is ready for this? Vance shrugged. Ready or not, it's happening. The Zainari have reached out to us, and we can't ignore them. This isn't just about exploration anymore, it's about survival. If we don't adapt, we risk being left behind. But what about the risks? Jasmine countered. People disappearing, equipment failing. You're gambling with lives. I won't deny there are risks, Vance said evenly. Every great leap forward comes with danger. Think about the first astronauts who went to the moon. They faced unknowns too. What sets us apart is our willingness to embrace uncertainty. Jasmine wanted to argue, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. Humanity had always thrived on taking risks, pushing boundaries and reaching for the stars. But this felt different. This wasn't just about conquering nature. It was about stepping into a world beyond human comprehension. The next day, Vance invited Jasmine to witness a live test of the Gateway prototype. She agreed, though her stomach churned with nerves. The team gathered in the observation deck watching as technicians prepared the machine. The hum of electricity filled the air, growing louder as the device powered up. Lights flickered across its surface, pulsing in rhythm with the energy surging through it. Initiating sequence in 10 seconds, a voice announced over the intercom. Jasmine gripped the railing, her eyes fixed on the machine. As the countdown reached 0, a brilliant flash of light erupted from the center of the device. The air shimmered, twisting and bending until a swirling vortex appeared. A wormhole, For a moment, everyone was silent, staring in awe at the phenomenon before them. Then, without warning, alarms blared and red lights began flashing. "Energy spike detected," someone shouted. "Shutting down." The vortex collapsed almost instantly, leaving behind a deafening silence. Jasmine exhaled sharply, realizing she'd been holding her breath. "What happened?" she asked, turning to Daniel. "We don't know yet," he replied grimly. "We'll need to review the data, but it's clear we're not ready for full-scale deployment." Despite the setback, Vance remained calm. "Setbacks are part of the process," he said firmly. "We'll learn from this and improve. Progress isn't linear." Jasmine admired his resolve, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were rushing into uncharted territory. The stakes were higher than anyone could fully comprehend. Yet, as she watched the scientists regroup and begin analyzing the results, she realized something important. This wasn't just Vance's mission anymore. Whether she liked it or not, she was now part of it. That night, lying awake in her quarters, Jasmine reflected on everything she'd seen. The Gateway prototype, the Zenari, the risks and rewards. It was overwhelming. But deep down, she felt a spark of excitement. This was the kind of challenge she lived for, the kind of mystery that drove her to pursue science in the first place. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again. The next morning, Jasmine woke up feeling a strange mix of excitement and dread. The events of the previous day, the wormhole test, the alarms, the collapse, had left her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about what Vance had said. Progress isn't linear. It was true, of course. Every great achievement in history had come with failures along the way. But this wasn't just about building a better engine or inventing a new gadget. This was about rewriting the rules of reality itself. The risks were enormous, and Jasmine wasn't sure humanity was ready to handle them. After breakfast, Carter approached her with an invitation that caught her off guard. "JD wants you to join us on a test run," he said casually, as if asking her to tag along for a casual outing. "We're sending a small team through the Gateway prototype to explore the other side." Jasmine froze. "Through the wormhole? Are you serious?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. We've made adjustments based on yesterday's data, and we believe it's stable enough for a short trip. Of course, there are no guarantees, but this is the next step." "No guarantees?" Jasmine repeated, her voice rising slightly. "What does that even mean? Could we get stuck? Lost, or worse?" "It means exactly what it sounds like," Daniel admitted. "But someone has to take the first step. You wanted answers, right? Well, here's your chance to find out for yourself." Jasmine hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to walk away from this madness and go back to her quiet life in Texas. But another part of her, the curious scientist who lived for discovery, couldn't resist. If this was real, if they could actually travel to another world, she had to see it. She had to be part of it. "I'm in," she said finally, surprising even herself. By midday, Jasmine found herself standing inside a compact spacecraft designed specifically for the mission. The vessel was sleek and minimalist, with just enough room for 4 people. Alongside her were Daniel, a pilot named Ryan Brooks, and Sarah Mitchell, the same woman who had warned her about stellar horizons weeks earlier. Jasmine hadn't expected to see Sarah again, let alone share a spaceship with her. "You look surprised," Sarah said, noticing Jasmine's expression. "I didn't think you'd trust Vance enough to climb aboard one of his death traps." "I don't fully trust him," Jasmine replied honestly. "But I can't ignore the possibility that this might actually work." Sarah smirked. "Fair point. Just don't say I didn't warn you." As the countdown began, Jasmine felt her heart pounding in her chest. The ship vibrated gently as it aligned with the Gateway prototype below. On the observation deck above, JD Vance watched silently, his face unreadable. When the final seconds ticked away, the wormhole roared to life once more, its swirling vortex glowing brighter than ever before. "Here we go," Ryan announced, gripping the controls. With a sudden lurch, the ship shot forward into the wormhole. For a moment, Jasmine thought she might pass out. The sensation was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Colors blurred together, light twisted and bent, and time seemed to stretch and compress all at once. Her body felt weightless, as though she were floating in a dream. She closed her eyes, trying to steady herself, but the disorienting effects only grew stronger. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went still. When Jasmine opened her eyes, she gasped. They weren't in the Nevada desert anymore, or anywhere remotely familiar. The landscape outside the ship was breathtakingly alien. Towering crystalline structures shimmered under a sky painted in hues of purple and gold. Strange plants swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves glowing faintly. In the distance, mountains rose like jagged teeth against the horizon, their peaks wreathed in mist. "Welcome to Zainari Prime," Daniel said softly, his voice filled with awe. Jasmine stared out the window, unable to speak. It was beautiful, but also unsettling. Everything about this place felt wrong, in a way she couldn't quite explain. The air hummed with energy, and the ground beneath them seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. "We should suit up," Ryan suggested, breaking the silence. "We don't know how breathable this atmosphere is." The team quickly donned their protective gear and exited the ship. As soon as Jasmine stepped onto the alien soil, she felt a strange tingling sensation in her fingertips. The ground was soft yet firm, almost spongy, and it emitted a faint warmth. She knelt down to examine it more closely, marveling at its texture and color. Before long, they were greeted by the Zenari. At first, Jasmine didn't realize what she was seeing. The beings appeared as shifting patterns of light, hovering silently in the air. Their forms were fluid, constantly changing shape, and they communicated not with words but with intricate sequences of colors and patterns. It was mesmerizing and completely incomprehensible. "They're welcoming us," Daniel explained, consulting a tablet connected to translation software. "They say they've been expecting us." "Expecting us?" Jasmine echoed, incredulous. "Why? They've been monitoring Earth for centuries," Sarah chimed in. "Remember what Vance told you? They've been guiding our development, nudging us toward this moment." Jasmine frowned. "Guiding us? What does that mean? Did they influence human evolution? Our technology?" "It's complicated," Daniel admitted. "They claim their role has been subtle, more like planting seeds than direct interference. But now that we've reached this stage, they want to help us grow further." As fascinating as the encounter was, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Not all the Zenari seemed pleased to see them. Some of the light patterns flickered erratically, and their movements became erratic and aggressive. One of the beings darted closer, its colors flashing red and black, a clear sign of hostility. "What's happening?" Jasmine asked, backing away instinctively. "They're divided," Sarah said grimly. "Not everyone agrees we're ready for this. Some factions believe humanity is too primitive, too dangerous to be trusted with advanced knowledge." The tension escalated when the hostile Zenari began emitting loud, piercing sounds that reverberated through the air. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and several of the crystalline structures nearby shattered into shards. Panic set in as the team scrambled back toward the ship. "We need to leave. Now!" Ryan shouted, sprinting ahead. But as they reached the vessel, disaster struck. A burst of energy from one of the hostile Zenari struck the ship, damaging its propulsion system. Smoke poured from the engine compartment, and alarms blared inside the cockpit. "We're not going anywhere," Daniel said, checking the damage. "The wormhole generator is offline. We'll have to repair it manually." Jasmine's stomach sank. Stranded on an alien planet, surrounded by beings who couldn't agree whether they should live or die, it was every nightmare scenario rolled into one. She glanced at Sarah, who looked equally uneasy. "What do we do now?" Jasmine asked, her voice trembling. "We wait," Sarah replied, "and hope Vance sends reinforcements before things get worse." Over the next few hours, the team worked tirelessly to fix the ship while keeping a wary eye on the Zenari. The hostile faction continued to circle them, their aggressive displays growing more intense. Meanwhile, the friendly Zenari attempted to mediate, using their light patterns to communicate messages of peace and patience. Despite the danger, Jasmine couldn't help but marvel at the situation. She was standing on an alien world, interacting with intelligent beings from another galaxy. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of, and more terrifying than she could have imagined. As night fell, the team huddled inside the ship, exhausted, but determined. Jasmine stared out the window at the surreal landscape, wondering if they'd make it home alive. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. This journey had changed her forever. Hours turned into a sleepless night as Jasmine and her team worked feverishly to repair the damaged ship. The air inside the cramped vessel was thick with tension, the hum of their tools occasionally drowned out by the eerie sounds of the hostile Zenari outside. Every time Jasmine glanced out the window, she saw flashes of red and black light, the aggressive faction's warning signals. It felt like a countdown to something worse. Daniel and Ryan focused on the engine while Sarah monitored the ship's systems for any signs of further damage. Jasmine, though not an engineer, did what she could to help, handing tools and holding parts steady. Her mind raced with questions. Would Vance send help? Could they really fix the ship in time? And if they couldn't, how long would the friendly Zenari continue to protect them from the others? At one point, Sarah leaned over to Jasmine and whispered, "If we don't get out of here soon, things are going to get ugly. Those hostile ones, they're not just angry, they're scared of us." "Scared?" Jasmine asked, confused. "Why would they be afraid of us?" "Because we're unpredictable," Sarah replied. "We've barely scratched the surface. Tough space exploration, and yet here we are, trying to barge into their world. They don't know what we're capable of or what we might do." Jasmine nodded slowly, understanding dawning on her. The hostility wasn't just about rejecting humanity. It was about fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of losing control. She realized that the Zenari weren't so different from humans after all. Just as despair began to creep in, a faint vibration shook the ground beneath them. At first, Jasmine thought it was another attack from the hostile Zenari, but then she noticed something strange in the sky. A shimmering portal appeared, glowing faintly against the alien twilight. Through it emerged a sleek spacecraft, Stellar, Horizon's rescue team. Relief washed over Jasmine as the ship descended and landed nearby. J.D. Vance himself stepped out, accompanied by a small group of engineers and security personnel. He looked calm, even confident, despite the chaos surrounding them. "I see you've been busy," he said dryly, approaching the stranded team. His tone was light, but his eyes betrayed his concern. "You're late," Jasmine shot back, unable to hide her frustration. "What took you so long?" "We had to stabilize the wormhole," Vance explained. "It wasn't easy getting it reopened after your little mishap, but I'm glad you're still in one piece." His words stung, but Jasmine didn't have time to dwell on them. The hostile Zenari were growing restless, their lights flickering wildly. Vance seemed to notice too, his expression hardening as he turned to address the situation. "We need to leave. Now," he said firmly. Turning to the friendly Zenari, he raised his hands in a gesture of gratitude. "Thank you for protecting them. We'll honor this moment and learn from it." The friendly Zenari responded with soft, calming patterns of light, as if acknowledging his words. But the hostile ones weren't satisfied. One of them surged forward, its colors blazing with fury. Vance's security team quickly formed a protective perimeter, weapons drawn but not yet fired. "Stand down," Vance ordered sharply. "We're not here to fight. Let's go." The rescue team moved swiftly, loading everyone onto the new ship. Jasmine hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the alien landscape. Despite everything, part of her didn't want to leave. This place, this encounter, had changed her in ways she couldn't fully understand, but there was no time to linger. With one last look, she climbed aboard. As the ship lifted off, Jasmine watched the Zenari grow smaller through the window. Some of the beings followed them briefly, their lights dimming as the distance increased. Then, suddenly, the wormhole reappeared, pulling them back toward Earth. The journey home was quieter than the trip to Zenari Prime. Exhausted, Jasmine sat in silence, replaying the events in her mind. She thought about the beauty of the alien world, the complexity of the Zenari, and the risks they'd taken to get there. Most of all, she thought about J.D. Vance. For all his arrogance and secrecy, he had come through when it mattered most. He hadn't abandoned them. When they finally arrived back at the Nevada facility, Vance called a private meeting with Jasmine. They sat in his office, the same room where they'd first spoken days earlier. Only now, the atmosphere was different. There was no posturing, no cryptic remarks, just two people reflecting on what had happened. "You were right to challenge me," Vance admitted, surprising Jasmine. "Your skepticism kept me honest. Without it, I might have pushed too far, too fast." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying you've changed your mind about keeping this secret?" "No," Vance replied. "But I realize now that transparency is key. Humanity needs leaders who ask tough questions, not just believers or doubters. You reminded me of that." Jasmine considered his words carefully. She still didn't agree with everything he'd done, but she saw a glimmer of humility in him now, a willingness to listen. "So what happens next?" she asked. "We keep moving forward," Vance said. "But we do it together. You've earned a seat at the table, Jasmine, if you want it." For a moment, Jasmine was speechless. She had started this journey determined to expose Vance's secrets, but now she found herself considering a role in shaping the future. It was a daunting prospect, but also exhilarating. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But only if you promise to keep pushing boundaries and asking the hard questions yourself." Vance smiled faintly. "Deal." In the weeks that followed, Jasmine returned to her lab, but her perspective had shifted. She continued working on her own projects, refining her ideas about propulsion systems and interstellar travel. But she also stayed in touch with Vance, offering input and advice on Stellar Horizons initiatives. Their relationship remained complicated. They often disagreed, but they shared a mutual respect born of shared experiences. One evening, Jasmine stood outside her lab, gazing up at the stars. The memory of Zenari Prime lingered in her mind, along with the faces of the Zenari, both friendly and hostile. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and uncertainties, but for the first time she felt ready to face them. The universe was vast and mysterious, full of wonders waiting to be discovered. And though humanity still had much to learn, Jasmine believed they were capable of rising to the occasion. After all, progress wasn't linear. It was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes terrifying. But it was also beautiful. As she turned to you, head back inside, Jasmine felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. Whatever came next, she would meet it head-on, with curiosity, courage, and an unwavering belief in the power of exploration.